My older sister, the golden child, our entire family always treated like the sun, scheduled her wedding on the exact same day as mine. That sentence dropped onto the dinner table so heavily it felt like the air split open in a thin, sharp, icy line. My parents looked at each other and burst out laughing, the kind of light laugh that made their cruelty sound like a harmless joke. The flickering candles reflected off Maren's glossy hair, making her look like she was glowing in exactly the way they wanted. I tightened my hand around the rim of the glass just to keep it from showing how it trembled. I stayed silent. Silence had never protected me, but it always made them think I was obedient. You don't mind, right? Maren's voice was soft as silk, but the hidden needle beneath it stabbed straight into me. I nodded once, a gesture thin as a breath. Everyone at the table took it as surrender. They didn't know that inside my purse, the guest list for my wedding had already been finalized long ago. And they certainly didn't know that in just 2 months, this exact place would fall silent again in a very different way. Because what they had taught me since childhood, silence, turned out to be the one lesson I would use to rise. Before I tell you what happened after that moment, tell me where you're watching this video from and at what time. I read every single comment. Because somewhere out there, someone has been underestimated, just like I was. If you've ever had to shrink so someone else could shine, hit like and subscribe, because silence is not weakness. Sometimes it's the only way to hold on to yourself. And now, let's go back to that evening. The night silence started becoming a weapon. There are memories that will stand there forever, like a shadow that never detaches from you. I was 8 years old. A misty Portland morning, cold air slipping through the old porch steps, the smell of damp wood blending with the distant sound of the streetcar. Maren stood in front, her white dress swaying softly, while my mother, Dana, fussed over every strand of her hair with the kind of patience reserved only for the person she loved unconditionally. Smile bigger, sweetheart. Her voice was soft, her eyes warm, but all of it was directed at Maren. I stood behind them, holding the lunchbox I had prepared myself early that morning, waiting for them to look back at me. No one did. The photographer praised Maren for having a natural charm. My father, Greg, nodded in satisfaction. I held out my test paper with a perfect score in front of him. He glanced at it briefly and said, "Don't show off, Julia. Your sister will feel upset." That sentence stabbed straight into my chest. And in that moment, I learned how to fold everything away. Every piece of paper, every small joy, every sound of my own voice. That evening, it rained again in Portland. The sound of rain tapping on the roof tiles felt like someone knocking on my heart constant, cold, and unheard. Maren laughed with my parents downstairs in the living room. The warm yellow light shone on their faces, creating a scene so cozy it felt like a place I did not belong to. I lay still in the dark room, wondering, would there ever be a day someone noticed how hard I was trying? But the answer came quickly. In this family, silence hurt less, and a child will do anything to feel the least amount of pain possible. Silence became the armor I had worn since that day. Light, thin, but it knew how to save me when needed. But there was one thing that happened that year, something that changed me forever. The next morning, I heard my mother speaking to my father in the kitchen. Maren was born to shine. Julia is strong. She can handle herself. That sentence anchored into me like a cold metal hook. Not because of cruelty, but because of truth. They genuinely believed I was the child who didn't need love. And from that day on, I knew I had to live in a way that kept me from being hurt again. What I didn't know was that this very silence would be the thing that made their world crumble 22 years later. There are wounds that don't explode. They seep into your bones little by little. Autumn in Portland was quiet, like an old film reel. Rain fell thinly, blurring the window frame and deepening the smell of fallen leaves. I remember when I was 14 years old, the day I got a report card full of A's. I walked into the living room with trembling hands, my heart rushing, as if I were carrying something wonderful. My father, Greg, was reading the newspaper. My mother, Dana, stood behind Maren, fixing every strand of her hair to film a short video for social media. Mom. Dad. I got Greg didn't look up. Good. But don't upset your sister. That sentence extinguished everything like a cold gust blowing out a candle. Maren turned around and smiled slightly, the kind of smile from someone who always knew she would win. I folded the report card. Slowly. Carefully. As if touching it too hard would make it hurt more. That night, I placed the paper inside a wooden box under my bed, the place where I started keeping evidence that I had tried. 2 years later, I liked a boy in my chemistry class named Sean, gentle, kind, and always lending me his notes when I forgot my pen. One evening, I was helping Maren braid her hair. I don't know why, but I accidentally told her I liked him. Maren looked at me through the mirror, her eyes shimmering. Unreadable. A smile formed slowly, softly, but with something sharp hidden beneath it, like a needle. The next day, Sean came to class wearing a blue knitted scarf. I recognized it instantly. It was Maren's style. 1 week later, they became the new couple. Mom said, "Julia, don't make a big deal. Maren is more charming." I just stood there, frozen, not crying. Maybe, because I already knew that everything belonging to me could so easily fall into Maren's hands. That night, the sound of the streetcar glided through the Pearl District long, a hollow like something inside me cracking. What they considered small was exactly what broke a person. At the end of 12th grade, I qualified to apply for a scholarship to Oregon State University. I wrote my essay for many weeks, meticulously, believing this was my chance to escape Maren's shadow. That evening, I placed the application on the dining table. "Mom, Dad, I need both your signatures." Dana glanced at it and said, "Maren needs financial support more. You're capable. Julia, you can handle it yourself." Greg nodded, as if it were perfectly reasonable. No one asked what I wanted. No one thought I had the right to want anything. The next morning, I went to work at a small office in the Pearl District. The sound of printers, the smell of new paper, the white fluorescent lights. I bought the first planner of my life, and from then on, I wrote down every bill, every email, and every event. If they didn't want to see me, I would rewrite myself. One stormy night, I walked past the kitchen and heard my mother whisper to my father, "Maren brings joy to the whole family. Julia is strong. She never needs anyone." I stood outside the doorway. Didn't step in. Didn't react. Silent like my own shadow. But in that moment, I understood something very simple. I was just a temporary resident in that house, not someone who belonged to it. I didn't know. The very things they dismissed would become the spark that burned everything down later. Sometimes, what hurts isn't what they say, but how they fall silent the moment you appear. Portland rain streaked down the glass roof, stretching the streetlights into long, melancholy lines. The breakfast table was bright, the soup warm, yet I felt cold. Dana talked about Maren's wedding dress. Greg asked about the photographer Maren had chosen. They talked about a wedding, but not mine. I swirled my glass, the small circle of water reflecting on the surface of the table. I found a place to order my wedding flowers. I said softly. No one stopped talking. No one looked at me. Only the sharp clinking of knives and forks against plates, the same sound I heard when I folded my award paper at 14 years old. As if pain knew exactly how to find its way back to me. Some small sounds seem harmless, yet they reopen an old wound. "I need to review Maren's wedding timeline tonight," Dana said, eyes never leaving her screen. Greg added, "Julia, small weddings are easier. You don't need to overdo it. A simple sentence. But it made me feel erased from my own big day. Outside the window, Portland rain stretched the lights into blurred strokes, just like how my family always blurred me out of every story. I wanted to say I also wanted a beautiful wedding, but my throat stopped. Silence. Like an old habit arriving on cue. While setting the pastries on the table, Maren laughed. "Julia, don't tell me you still remember the Sean thing?" Everyone laughed along. Their laughter clashed like glass, beautiful to them, sharp to me. My hand paused for half a second. Not much, but enough to make my heart contract. The rain hit harder against the window pane. The air in the room thickened, like I was sitting among my family, yet completely alone. And in that exact moment, I realized I wasn't invisible. They simply chose not to see me. I didn't know. That very night, the night no one saw me, would be the reason my life would change. There are small moments, but they are enough to turn the entire direction of a story. Portland that day was gloomy, the sky thick and gray, rain falling endlessly like a backdrop for something about to happen. I received a message from Dana. "Remember to come help your sister with the rehearsal. Maren needs you." There was no question about whether I was free. No mention that I was also about to get married. That evening, when I got home, my phone lit up again. "Julia, go pick up flowers for Maren for me. Stop by tonight to look at your sister's wedding invitations." Every message placed Maren's tasks at the center. And mine, like a side project. I was chopping vegetables for dinner when Greg called. "Fix your timeline. Let your mother focus on your sister's big ceremony first." I tightened my grip on the knife. Not hard, but it was enough to make me realize, for the first time in many years, I did not want to answer. "Yes." I simply said, "I'm busy." The air in the kitchen shifted, a thickened silence. Surprised, because I had never said that before. That night, I opened my planner. The desk light washed over each page, filled with bullet points, timelines, receipts, addresses, and checklists. Unlike in Section 4, this time, the audience sees clearly. I was not small. I had a strategy. I had finalized everything for my own wedding weeks ago, elegant, streamlined, beautiful, and peaceful. There were confirmation letters from the venue, emails from the florist, and receipts from the photographer. My planner was the only thing that belonged to me that they could not take. Maren had noise. I had preparation. And preparation is the quietest form of power. When someone stays silent for too long, the moment they say no, the entire room changes color. The next day, Maren sent a long message. "Come with me to try on wedding dresses. I want you next to me to compare the colors." I looked at the message, that familiar feeling returning. I was being pulled back into the universe revolving around her. I took a breath, then replied, "I'm busy that day." Maren's message showed seen, but she didn't reply. 2 minutes later, Dana called. "Julia, why did you refuse?" "Your sister needs you." I looked out the window, where Portland rain was falling lightly. I answered softly, "I have my own plans." No arguing, no attitude, but enough to keep my parents silent for a few seconds, because the Julia they knew would never say that. That evening, Greg came to my room. His voice tried to stay calm. "Reschedule your meeting with the wedding coordinator to next week. Your mother is overwhelmed with Maren's things." I put my pen down, looked up, met his eyes. "I'm not rescheduling." My voice was low, slow, no apology. Greg stood there for a few seconds as if he were looking at a stranger, someone who no longer accepted being behind anyone. I closed my planner, the soft click sounding like a final confirmation. They didn't know. I had been preparing for that day for a very long time. Every major turning point, begins with one very small decision. That morning, Portland had a cold. Steel-colored light slipping through my apartment window and falling across my desk. My planner lay open clean, sharp lines, written in handwriting that even I barely recognized as my own. I called the venue. The receptionist's voice rang through the speaker. "Miss Julia, you want to keep the Grand Sapphire Ballroom for the 29th, correct?" I looked at the word confirmed in my planner. My chest tightened not from fear, but from a new kind of clarity. I spoke slowly. "Yes, I'm keeping that date." The receptionist hesitated. "But your sister's family already am keeping it." I cut her off. Softly, but leaving no room for negotiation. I hung up the phone. The smell of hot coffee spread through the quiet room. Rain fell outside, each drop reminding me. Today, for the first time in many years, my silence was no longer a shield. It was momentum. Not everyone notices when someone has changed direction. The light from my laptop screen cast a pale blue halo across my face, the color of silent decisions. I opened my company's internal email system, created a new draft with the subject line, "RSVP required. Ramsey Donovan wedding ceremony." I typed each line carefully, not rushing, not trembling. I selected the list. Department heads, project directors, executive teams, Elijah's father, chairman of the board. The names appeared like a grand orchestra I was conducting. The cursor blinked at the end of the last line. Just one small beat. But it felt like it changed the entire room. I didn't send it yet. I saved it. Waiting is the leverage behind every reversal. That evening, Elijah walked into the room holding 2 cups of hot cocoa. He looked at the planner spread across the table, then looked at me. "Julia, you're sure you're not moving the wedding date?" I lifted my head. The light reflected in his eyes, worried, but respectful. And the light in mine was different. "I'm not running anymore." I said it slowly. Not loudly. Not defensively. Elijah sat beside me. "I support you. It's just that you're very calm." I smiled slightly. I spent too many years letting other people decide for me. I want them to know. I also know how to stand in the center of the light. Elijah gently touched my hand, saying nothing more. He understood. My silence today was a declaration. Late at night, Portland rain had thinned, but the night wind still carried a chill that made the window pane tremble softly. I laid everything out on the table. Flower receipts, seating chart lists, confirmation from the orchestra, lighting design from the hotel, sample printed wedding invitation. I checked each item, each line, each detail. Every mouse click, every stroke of my pen, precise like a quiet stitch. I opened the drawer, took out the 100-point award paper from my childhood, the one that once made them tell me, "Don't upset your sister." I placed it next to the wedding timeline. 2 worlds, 2 Julias lying side by side. I touched the old paper. Its folds mirrored all the times I had folded myself small. The planner pages before me mirrored everything I was now expanding. I closed the planner. The soft click echoed through the still room, sounding like a promise. I looked out the window, Portland's lights reflected as a thin gold streak across the glass. I was ready, and they still had no idea. I no longer stood where I used to. The day they expected to make me small would become the day I stood tallest. There are moments when silence is louder than collapse itself. At noon, inside the Grand Sapphire, the lights fell into golden patches across the marble floor, reflecting like a still lake. I stepped into Ballroom A, my wedding hall, and the first sound I heard was the elegant, resonant murmur of refined laughter. The room was full of guests. Dark suits, evening gowns, polite handshakes. A staff member whispered to another, "Strange, Ballroom B barely has any guests." I didn't turn around, but I could feel the air on the other side of the building beginning to hollow out. It isn't the truth that hurts people. It's when the truth happens, in front of others. The doors of the ballroom swung open sharply. Maren walked in first, her white dress flaring, breath unsteady. Spencer followed behind her. Dana and Greg trailed after them, faces caught between confusion and discomfort. They had expected me to be in a small, forgettable ceremony, but instead, they saw the entire executive team, the board of directors, the Donovan family, my colleagues, Elijah's friends, the company's internal media team. No one turned to look at them as honored guests. They became lost attendees. Maren almost whispered, "Julia, why are all my guests here?" Spencer looked around, chest rising and falling. This is my entire company's guest list. Why are they?" Dana forced out a smile. "There must be some kind of misunderstanding," Greg stammered. We thought I stood still. No comment. No smile. No explanation. My silence became a mirror, and in it, they saw themselves smaller, trembling, fractured. "Mr. Donovan stepped onto the small stage, his voice deep and slow. "Today, there are 2 weddings." He paused, staring directly at Maren's family. "But only one of them is the reason I am here." The room froze into complete stillness. A few cameras flashed. Maren blinked repeatedly. Dana lowered her head. Greg swallowed. Spencer avoided everyone's eyes. I just stood there, calm, truly still. I didn't need to do anything else. The truth had taken over the rest. And that was only the first door to close. After the noise fades, what remains is the truth. The next morning in Portland was so quiet I felt as if the whole city were holding its breath. The early sunlight slipped through the curtains, falling into thin golden streaks across the wooden floor, not bright, just enough to make the apartment look like a clean sheet of paper. I stood in the kitchen, stirring my cup of coffee gently. No demanding messages. No blaming phone calls. No heavy emails. Just the smell of coffee, the kettle clicking softly, and a lightness in my chest, a feeling I hadn't had in years. I did not think about Ballroom B. Did not think about Maren's shattered expression. Did not think about Greg's dry swallow. I simply stood there, inside the quiet I had created for myself. Peace is not loud. It arrives very softly. Elijah walked in, hair slightly messy, hands in his pockets, eyes still touched by sleep. He leaned against the kitchen doorway, looking at me as if he were seeing a version of me he had been waiting for. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low and deep as if afraid to break the atmosphere. I nodded. "Okay. More than most days." Elijah didn't say anything else. He just placed a hand on my back, not pushing, not pulling, not trying to fix me. That moment, simple yet powerful, made me realize there are people who don't need noise to stand on your side. The apartment was quiet, but not heavy. It was peaceful. After breakfast, I sat at the table and opened my planner. The pages, once filled with dense tasks, now looked like footprints of a journey already completed. I wrote the final line. Ramsey Donovan wedding. Completed. I closed the planner. The soft click echoed a sound so light no one but me would notice. But to me, it felt like a final period. I thought of Dana, Greg, and Maren likely trying to piece together the story in whatever way benefited them. But that was no longer my concern. Peace, I realized, doesn't come from being loved, but from no longer waiting for others to change. I stood up and opened the window. The late afternoon Portland light touched the edge of the window, creating a soft outline around the apartment. I stood beside the table, where my planner had been closed since the morning. The final page was still warm beneath my hand, not from pressure, but from something very different. Self-possession. I once thought peace came from other people's acceptance. But in truth, it arrives the moment you let go of expectations and see yourself more clearly than ever. If you've ever stayed silent to keep the peace, you've ever made yourself smaller so someone else could shine, you've ever been treated like the background in your own story, then you are not alone. Some wounds leave no marks, but they still teach us how to stand tall in the quietest ways. Have you ever felt what Julia felt? Tell me your story. I read every comment. Like and subscribe so I can share more meaningful and powerful stories with you. See you in the next story.